Have you ever wondered why some men are unforgettable, even when they say so little? Why is it that a woman can meet dozens of guys, but one conversation, one glance, one presence stays with her all night? It's not luck, it's not magic, and it's definitely not about looks or money. It's something far more powerful, something most men overlook while chasing validation, approval, or attention. The truth is, you don't have to become someone else to leave a lasting impression. You just have to unlock what's already within you. See, women are not thinking about what car you drive or how expensive your shoes are. That might catch the eye for a moment. But the mind, the heart, they remember something deeper, something invisible. They remember the man who made them feel, not the loudest man in the room, not the most charming, but the one who carried something different. A calm certainty, a silent fire, a presence that lingered long after he walked away. And here's what no one tells you. This presence isn't about pretending to be someone you're not. It's not about lines, tactics, or games. It's about alignment. It's about knowing who you are so deeply that others feel it before you even speak. That's what captures attention. That's what leaves a mark. And when you have that, a woman won't just notice you. She'll think about you long after the world goes quiet. Most men are trying to impress, but a man who knows his worth doesn't need to. He doesn't chase. He doesn't explain. He doesn't compete. He simply shows up with full awareness of what he brings. And that energy, it's unforgettable. It's rare. It's magnetic. Because we live in a world where everyone is trying to be seen, but very few have the courage to see themselves first. That's where it starts. Not with her, but with you. With the way you carry yourself when no one's watching, the way you walk into a room without needing attention, yet still commanding it, the way you can hold silence, not as weakness, but as strength. That confidence, that grounded, unshakable energy, it speaks volumes. And a woman can feel it on a level she can't even explain. You may not have realized it, but you've already had moments where you almost had it. That one time you didn't try too hard, but things just clicked. That one day you were so focused on your purpose that people naturally gravitated toward you. That's not coincidence, that's alignment. And when you learn to live from that space daily, when it becomes who you are and not who you're trying to be, everything changes. This is the shift from seeking approval to becoming undeniable, from chasing attention to mastering presence. And once you step into that, you don't just stand out, you stay in her mind. Because there's nothing more attractive than a man who doesn't need anyone to complete him, yet chooses to connect deeply. A man who leads with stillness, not noise. With depth, not surface-level charm. That's the kind of man a woman can't shake off, even in the quietest hours of the night. And make no mistake, this isn't about control. It's not manipulation. It's not about tricks to make someone think about you. It's about becoming the kind of man who naturally imprints himself on people simply by being deeply rooted in who he is. A man who moves from purpose, not pressure, from intention, not impulse, from clarity, not confusion. That kind of energy is rare, and people remember rare. So ask yourself, when she walks away from you, what is she left with? What does she replay in her mind? Was it noise, or was it presence? Was it desperation, or was it confidence wrapped in calm? The reason this matters is because in a world full of distractions, what people truly crave is depth. And if you can offer that, if you can show up with purpose, with clarity, with emotional intelligence and strength, you don't have to beg for attention. You become the thought she returns to, again and again and again. You already have everything it takes. But until you stop trying to get someone to notice you and start focusing on becoming someone worth remembering, nothing changes. The man who understands this doesn't chase moments, he creates them. He doesn't need permission to be powerful, he just is. And when you learn to show up in your full power, without apology, without facade, that's when the shift happens. That's when you stop being one of many and become the one she can't forget. Stay with this, because what you'll discover next will change the way you see yourself forever. She won't remember the words you said. She'll remember how your presence made her feel. That's the part most men miss. They focus on what to say, trying to sound clever or impressive. But what a woman truly connects with is your energy. The invisible frequency you emit when you're aligned with who you are. It's not what comes out of your mouth that matters most. It's what radiates from your spirit. Every human being is wired to respond emotionally before logically. That's not weakness. It's biology. We feel before we think. And when you can shift her emotional state just by being near, without needing to perform or prove anything, you become someone her mind won't let go of. Because you've touched something deeper than attraction. You've tapped into emotional resonance. You don't need to be the loudest man in the room. You don't need to dominate the conversation or be the life of the party. In fact, the opposite is true. Real strength is quiet. It doesn't beg. It doesn't boast. It just is. And when you show up rooted, unshaken, calm in a world of chaos, people can't help but feel drawn to you. Not because you ask them to, but because their soul recognizes yours. This is where most men lose themselves. They seek external validation to feel internal worth. But that's a losing game. Because as long as you need someone else to see your value, you'll always be chasing their approval. And that desperation, that hunger to be seen, it repels the very connection you're craving. Because no one can give you what you haven't already given yourself. The moment you stop trying to impress her and start standing firmly in your own value, everything shifts. She can sense the difference. Women are highly intuitive more than you know. They pick up on subtle cues, emotional signals, and energetic inconsistencies. You can't fake presence. You can't fake peace. You either live in alignment or you don't. And when you do, when you truly own who you are without apology, you become a rare breed. You're not trying to fill a void. You're not trying to convince someone to choose you. You're too focused on becoming the man you would respect. The man whose purpose speaks louder than his words. The man who walks through life with clarity, not confusion. That energy, it stays with her. It lingers. It haunts in the best way possible. Because what really captivates a woman isn't perfection. It's presence. It's certainty. It's the ability to hold space for her emotions without needing to dominate, fix, or control them. It's knowing who you are so completely that her chaos doesn't shake your peace. That's what makes her feel safe. That's what keeps her thinking about you when she's lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it is about you that she can't forget. Presence is power, not just in how you hold yourself, but in how you listen. When was the last time you listened? Not to respond, but to understand. When you give someone your full attention, when you make them feel like they are the only person in the world in that moment, you create a memory. Not because of what you said, but because of how seen they felt. And in a world where everyone is rushing, swiping, scrolling, real attention is rare. Real stillness is powerful. Be the calm. Be the presence. Be the man who listens with his eyes, his body, his silence. That's when she starts thinking about you at night. That's when you stop being a moment and become a memory. It's easy to talk. Anyone can speak. But very few men have mastered the art of being. Being steady, being focused, being intentional. This is the silent signal that captures a woman's mind long after the conversation ends. When you carry yourself like a man who doesn't need anything from anyone, but still chooses to show up with strength, grace, and authenticity, that's the energy she won't forget. And it's not just about her. This is bigger than that. Because the moment you become fully present in your own life, everything around you begins to respond. People listen differently. Opportunities show up. Doors open. You stop chasing and you start attracting. Not because you said the right words, but because you became the right energy. So the next time you walk into a room, don't worry about who's watching. Don't think about who you need to impress. Just ask yourself one question. Am I rooted in who I am? Because when you are, the right people will feel it. The right woman will feel it. And she'll carry that feeling with her long after you've gone. Not because you tried to be unforgettable, but because you were. And if you've never felt that kind of power before, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't chase but attracts, now is the time. Because once you taste it, you'll never settle for anything less. And neither will she. Confidence isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need permission. True confidence walks into the room with nothing to prove and everything to offer. It's not in your words, it's in your walk, your stillness, your energy. It's in the way you stand tall when the world tries to shrink you. In the way your eyes don't dart around for approval, but remain focused, calm, steady. That's what a woman notices long before you ever speak. That's what stays in her mind. The modern world confuses arrogance with strength. But arrogance is a mask, fragile, defensive, desperate. Confidence is quiet certainty. It's the deep-rooted belief that you are enough as you are, yet still striving to become more, not for validation, but for purpose. And that energy, that calm conviction, sends a signal without you even realizing. It tells the world and her that you don't need anything, but you're open to everything. You're grounded, solid, a presence she can trust. Most men are reactive. They adjust themselves to who's watching. They shift their posture, their tone, even their values just to be liked. But a man who knows who he is doesn't bend like that. He doesn't try to fit into a world that was never built to define him. He shapes it instead. He doesn't follow energy. He creates it. When you walk in purpose, everything changes. The way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way you look at her. Not to seek approval, but to see her, really see her. That's what breaks through the noise, because women don't want a man who tries to impress every woman. They want a man who impresses himself daily with his own discipline, his own growth, his own integrity. When you become that kind of man, she doesn't just admire you, she remembers you. You don't need to speak louder to be heard. You just need to speak with intention. Every word, every pause, every glance should carry the weight of self-respect. Not arrogance, not ego, but that inner certainty that says, I know who I am, and I know what I stand for. That's what sticks in a woman's mind long after you leave. It's not about what you said. It's about how she felt in your presence. Safe, challenged, intrigued, seen. But let's be honest, most men haven't built that foundation. They're building their confidence on sand, money, status, aesthetics. And the moment one of those things crumbles, so does their identity. That's why you see so many men collapse under pressure, because what they thought was strength was only a costume. But real strength is built from the inside out, quietly, repeatedly, in the dark when no one is watching. You don't rise by accident. You rise by intention. You rise every time you say no to the easy thing and yes to the meaningful one. Every time you resist distraction to pursue mastery. Every time you choose growth over comfort. That's where confidence is born, in silence, in struggle, in self-respect. And when you show up in the world with that kind of self-made confidence, people feel it, she feels it, and it captivates her, because it's so rare. Here's what most don't understand. You don't have to convince her to think about you. You just have to give her something real to feel. Real confidence doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't push, it pulls. It doesn't shout, it resonates. It's the echo in her mind when the world goes quiet. The presence that made her feel something deeper. Something she can't explain but craves again and again. So ask yourself this. Are you building a version of yourself that people forget the moment you leave? Or are you becoming the man who lingers in their thoughts, not because of flash, but because of depth? The man who moves with calm intention, the man who listens more than he speaks, the man who carries peace like armor and purpose like fire. That man isn't common. That man isn't loud. But that man stays in her mind. Not just because he's different, but because he's real. The reason she can't stop thinking about you isn't because you tried harder than every other man. It's because you were different, internally. While others scrambled to impress, you stood still in your truth. While others projected confidence, you embodied it. That difference is felt, not just noticed, felt. And feelings linger far longer than appearances. When a man knows himself, truly knows himself, he becomes magnetic, because that level of self-awareness is rare. It's not born from ego or image. It's forged through discipline, reflection, and a quiet commitment to growth. It's seen in how you speak without seeking validation, in how you act without needing applause, in how you love yourself without arrogance and respect others without weakness. That kind of man doesn't chase attraction. He becomes it. Understand this. Women are not drawn to perfection. They're drawn to authenticity. They're drawn to the man who can look her in the eyes and be fully present. The man who doesn't shrink when challenged. The man who doesn't hide when things get real. Because that's what creates emotional safety. That's what builds connection that lasts longer than a moment. It's what separates a memory from an experience. You want her to think about you all night? Then stop trying to be what you think she wants. Start becoming the man you were born to be. Because the truth is, most people live their lives reacting. They mirror what's around them. But real men are architects. They don't react to the environment. They create it. You shape the energy of every room you enter. Not with dominance, but with direction. Not with force, but with clarity. Clarity is attractive. It's rare. A man who knows where he's going doesn't need to convince others to follow. People naturally align with him because his certainty gives them a sense of direction. That's the kind of man who becomes unforgettable, not just because of how he makes people feel, but because of what he awakens in them. A woman doesn't think about you all night because you complimented her or made her laugh. She thinks about you because your energy made her reflect. Your words carried truth. Your silence held weight. You didn't just entertain her, you challenged her, not aggressively, not manipulatively, but through the calm strength of a man who isn't afraid to go deeper. That's where intimacy begins. Not in physical touch, but in mental impact. When you speak from your soul, you don't need to repeat yourself. Your message echoes long after you're gone. That's what sticks. That's what pulls her back into thoughts of you when the noise fades and the night grows still. And that's what most men overlook. They focus on attention instead of intention. They learn tactics instead of building character. But the truth is, when you shift your energy inward, when you become obsessed with refining your mindset, your focus, your integrity, you become rare. And the rare are never forgotten. She doesn't want to be impressed by your image. She wants to feel the gravity of your purpose. She wants to sense the direction you're headed because it tells her who you are. And more importantly, it tells her if she'll be safe walking beside you. That's what makes her think. That's what keeps her awake. Not the performance, the presence. And you don't build that kind of presence overnight. You build it in the small moments, in the way you show up for yourself when no one else does, in the way you keep your word, even to yourself, in the way you respond to pressure, failure, and silence. That's what shapes the man you become. That's what turns you from just another face into a force. There's nothing louder than a man who moves in silence, with purpose. A man who doesn't advertise his growth, but you can feel it, in how he carries pain without bitterness, in how he respects others without losing himself, in how he doesn't need attention because he's already aligned with his mission. That man doesn't wonder if he's enough. He knows he is, and that's exactly why she thinks about him. Because in a world full of men trying to be seen, he sees himself first. That's the lesson. Stop waiting for someone else to validate you. Stop hoping to be remembered. Build yourself into someone who can't be forgotten, not through effort, but through embodiment, not through tactics, but through truth. The moment you begin showing up as that man, everything changes. You won't need to chase her thoughts. You'll live in them. You become unforgettable the moment you stop seeking permission to be powerful. Not the kind of power that controls others, the kind that controls you, the kind that keeps your emotions steady when the world tries to shake you, the kind that walks into a room without needing recognition, yet commands it effortlessly. That internal power, the kind forged in silence, in solitude, in struggle, is the very thing that captures her mind and holds her attention long after you're gone. Most men were never taught how to access that power. They were told to impress, to perform, to prove. But the truth is, the more you chase significance outside of yourself, the more you lose the very thing that makes you magnetic, your inner center. Because the moment your value depends on someone else seeing it, you've already given it away. She remembers you when you remember yourself, when you stand for something, when you speak with conviction, when you stop playing small to fit in and start expanding to break through. That's when you rise above the noise. That's when you stop being one of many and become the one she compares the rest to. And it's not about dominance. It's not about control. It's about alignment. The man who is aligned with who he is doesn't need to take anything from anyone. He doesn't need to beg for attention. He commands it through presence, through clarity, through an energy that says, I've done the work. I know who I am. I don't need to convince you. I live it. And that energy is rare. It's almost spiritual. It's what makes her pause in the middle of her day, wondering why she still feels your presence, wondering what it was about your voice, your eyes, your energy that left such a deep impression. It's because you didn't try to be anything for her. You just showed up as everything you already were. And that kind of authenticity, it's intoxicating. But understand this, authenticity takes courage. It takes the guts to stand alone, to walk away from the shallow approval of the crowd and build your own code. Not just what you say you value, what you live, every decision, every moment. Every conversation is either in alignment with your higher self, or it's not. When she sees that consistency, it builds something deeper than attraction. It builds respect, and respect lasts longer than desire. Desire fades, respect grows. She may not even understand why you stay in her mind, but her spirit recognizes the depth of yours. That's the kind of connection that doesn't dissolve with distance. It intensifies. And here's what most never realize. Mystery doesn't come from hiding. It comes from being whole. The most mysterious man is the one who reveals nothing extra and hides nothing real. He gives you what's true, and he gives it freely, but he doesn't give it all. Because he's not performing, he's living. And that balance between openness and restraint is magnetic. When you have nothing to prove, you become unstoppable, not because you know everything, but because you're grounded in what matters: purpose, presence, peace. And that energy speaks louder than any words you could say. It tells her, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to live fully. And if you're aligned with that, let's go. That's the difference. You're not just trying to be remembered. You're becoming a man worth remembering. And here's the truth. If you're still trying to get her to think about you, you haven't become him yet. Because when you do, the thought of you won't be a choice. It'll be automatic, unshakable, unexplainable. Because you touched something deeper than her body. You touched her mind. You triggered reflection. You planted something real in a world full of fake. And that seed grows in her long after the conversation ends. So if you're wondering why she hasn't reached out, why she moved on quickly, ask yourself, were you present? Or were you pretending? Did you show up as a man of vision and stillness, or as another echo of the crowd? This isn't about being liked. It's about being felt. When a woman feels the strength of your soul, the parts of you that no longer flinch under pressure, that no longer fear solitude, that no longer bend to please, that's when you earn her curiosity. That's when she plays back the interaction over and over in her mind, looking for clues, trying to understand what just happened. Because it wasn't your charm, it wasn't your words, it was you, the real you. That man leaves an imprint no one else can. Become him, and you'll never have to wonder who's thinking about you again. If she doesn't feel your absence, it's because your presence never shook her soul. A man who is unforgettable doesn't need to be loud, charming, or even perfect. He just needs to be real. Real in his values, real in his energy, real in the way he moves through the world without needing to explain himself. Because in a world addicted to noise, masks, and filters, the raw truth of a grounded man is disarming. It cuts through the distractions. It commands attention, not by demand, but by depth. You don't need to do more, you need to be more. The men who get remembered aren't the ones who tried harder. They're the ones who became something others rarely encounter. A man in full alignment. A man who walks into every space without shrinking or stretching, because he's already whole. That's the man who lingers in her thoughts when the night gets quiet, when the world has paused, when she has space to feel, and what rises to the surface is not a rehearsed line or a practiced look, but the impact of your essence, that quiet strength, that still certainty, that rare peace you carried like armor, not to protect yourself, but to calm everyone around you. Because what truly stays in her mind isn't how much you smiled. It's how you made her feel when she looked at you and saw a man who didn't need her attention to feel powerful. A man who could look her in the eyes and not flinch, not because he wanted to control her, but because he had nothing to hide. That transparency, that emotional honesty, that unshakable calm, that's what she replays long after the moment ends. But here's the part most avoid. To become this man, you must detach from outcome. You can't care if she likes you. You can't hinge your value on her response. You must care more about being the kind of man who respects himself than about being the kind of man she finds attractive. Because ironically, the second you let go of needing her to want you, that's when she does. Not out of manipulation, but out of magnetism. Out of respect. Out of that deep, ancient instinct that whispers, this man is different. Because you didn't just offer attention, you offered stability. You didn't just flirt, you listened. You didn't just seek validation. You carried self-worth. That level of emotional discipline is rare. And women, consciously or not, feel it. They notice the difference between the man who wants to be chosen and the man who has already chosen himself. That's where true attraction is born. In the moments when she realizes she isn't the center of your world, but a potential addition to something powerful already in motion. You're not waiting to be completed. You're walking a path so rooted, so purposeful, that she either aligns with it or watches you pass by. And that energy, it doesn't fade, it echoes. She could meet 10 other men after you, but something in her will compare them all to the clarity you carried, the peace you projected, the silence that said more than words ever could. That's not seduction, that's presence. And presence is the loudest language on earth. If you're still chasing, still convincing, still trying to perform, stop. Let that version of you die. Kill the need to be seen and replace it with the need to become. Because becoming is the real game. Becoming is the only path. Not to impress her, but to respect yourself. Because once you respect yourself at the highest level, everything else shifts. Your voice slows down. Your decisions sharpen. Your boundaries tighten. You stop entertaining chaos. You stop explaining your worth. You start walking like a man who has already arrived, not at perfection, but at alignment. And when you reach that level of inner mastery, she won't just notice you. She'll feel you, even in your silence, even in your absence. Because the impression you leave isn't made through force. It's made through depth, through intention, through the undeniable power of a man who doesn't just exist. He leads. Lead with your presence. Lead with your values. Lead with your discipline. That's the man who stays on her mind. Not for a night, not for a week, but for life. You don't become that man by chance. You become him by choosing to rise every day, before anyone claps, before anyone cares, before anyone sees. Because the real ones, they're already watching. And deep down, she's hoping you're him. If she's hoping you're him, it means she's waiting to feel something real. Not a performance, not a script, not another carefully calculated move from a man trying to win her over. She's waiting to be disarmed by authenticity, to feel the quiet weight of a presence that doesn't beg for attention, but demands reflection. Because there's a difference between being noticed and being felt. You get noticed when you flash status, charm, or attention. But you get felt when your words align with your values, when your eyes hold depth, not desire, when your silence speaks louder than others' noise. That kind of energy doesn't just attract, it awakens something in her. A sense that this moment matters, that who you are is more than what she sees, that behind your calm voice and steady posture is a man who's built himself in ways most never do. And that's exactly what separates you. You don't move through the world needing to be loved. You move through it rooted in self-respect. That quiet confidence, born not from arrogance but from consistency, becomes unforgettable. Because most people talk. Few live truth. Most want connection. Few are ready for the weight of it. Most want to be chosen. Few choose themselves first. But when you do choose yourself, fully, deeply, without apology, everything changes. You start showing up differently. Your standards rise. Your conversations shift. Your presence sharpens. You no longer entertain what doesn't align. You no longer water yourself down to keep peace. You no longer chase validation like it's oxygen. And that shift is powerful because now you're not just a man in her life. You're a mirror. You reflect back her own greatness, her own fears, her own desire for something deeper. Not by manipulating her emotions, but by owning yours. Not by pretending to be perfect, but by being so honest about your imperfections that it frees her from hiding hers. That's intimacy, that's trust, that's why she can't stop thinking about you. You've shown her a version of masculinity that doesn't control, but anchors. A presence that doesn't overwhelm, but empowers. A voice that doesn't seek attention, but earns respect. You don't have to force your way into her thoughts. You become the thought that lingers when everything else fades. But here's the truth that most won't tell you. That kind of presence isn't natural. It's built in silence, in solitude, in the moments when nobody's watching. It's built in how you talk to yourself, in how you show up when it's hard, in how you keep going when no one claps. That's where real power is born, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. You cannot fake this. You cannot shortcut this. You must earn it through discipline, through emotional intelligence, through the repeated decision to grow, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Because the man who chooses growth over comfort becomes the one who outlasts, outshines, and outlives every shallow impression. She doesn't think about you all night because you were convenient. She thinks about you because you were clear, clear in who you are, clear in what you want, clear in what you will and will not tolerate. That kind of clarity is rare. It's magnetic. It's dangerous to the status quo because it pulls people out of their illusions and into the truth. And that's why she feels something different when you speak. That's why your presence is still alive in her chest, even hours later. The man who can hold that kind of space without needing to be right, without needing to dominate, without needing to prove, is the man who doesn't chase love. He draws it in. Because love follows strength. Not the strength of ego or dominance, but the deeper strength of inner peace, of knowing who you are without needing anyone to agree, of being rooted when the world wavers, of standing tall when others fold. And when a woman feels that, not just in your words, but in your essence, it becomes impossible to forget you. So stop asking what she wants. Start asking who you're becoming. Because when you become a man who's mastered his emotions, honored his path, sharpened his purpose, and led himself with unshakable clarity, The right woman won't just think about you. She'll feel your impact long after you're gone. That's not game. That's not luck. That's not manipulation. That's what happens when you decide you will no longer be a product of the world. You will be the force that shapes it. The moment you stop seeking to impress and start choosing to embody, everything shifts. You no longer walk into a room wondering who will like you. You walk in knowing you belong because you've built yourself in the dark, where no one claps, where the only applause comes from the voice within that knows what you've survived. That's the voice that matters. That's the voice she feels when she looks at you and senses something she can't quite name but can't seem to forget. It's not about your appearance, it's about your aura. The quiet tension of a man who's faced his demons and didn't flinch. The stillness of someone who's done the inner work most or too afraid to begin. Women aren't obsessed with perfection, they're moved by depth. They remember the man who made them feel safe, not through control but through certainty. The man whose eyes said, "I don't need to own you. I've already claimed myself." That's the kind of energy that stays on her mind at midnight. That's the kind of presence she replays in the quiet hours, when the world has gone still and only truth remains. And that presence doesn't come from charm or strategy, it comes from discipline. Discipline in how you think, discipline in how you speak, discipline in what you allow into your life. Because every time you lower your standards to keep someone, you lose a piece of your own power. Every time you betray your gut for approval, you shrink your soul. That's why you must become a man who is unshakably loyal to his own intuition. When your boundaries are firm and your heart is open, you create the rarest energy on earth, safety without submission, power without ego, strength without noise. That is what she longs for, even if she doesn't say it. She wants to feel like she can breathe in your presence, that she can let her guard down and still feel protected. But here's the truth. She won't let her guard down for a man who hasn't dropped his own mask. If you're still hiding, still pretending, still performing, she'll feel it. Maybe not consciously, but something in her will resist. Because authenticity recognizes authenticity, and real attracts real. That's why becoming unforgettable has nothing to do with how much you say and everything to do with how true you are. Are you still negotiating with yourself? Are you still giving energy to distractions? Still watering down your truth to be palatable? Or have you decided that being fully you is more important than being accepted? Because that's where your gravity is born. When you stop diluting your essence to fit into boxes that were never built for you, you become magnetic, not to everyone, but to the ones who matter. And most importantly, you become magnetic to yourself. You respect your own reflection. You sleep in peace. You speak with integrity. That's when you stop being the man who waits to be remembered and become the man no one can forget. And here's what most don't understand. It's not about being liked. It's about being aligned. When you are in full alignment with your values, your mission, your truth, you no longer have to chase connection. You become the standard by which connection is measured. She thinks about you because you stood for something, because you were still when others were desperate, because you were intentional when others were impulsive. That kind of presence rewires her memory. It lives in her nervous system. Not because you gave her butterflies, but because you gave her peace. The world is full of noise. Be the silence that cuts through it. The world is full of pretenders. Be the truth that exposes it. The world is full of chasers. Be the presence that waits for no one. Because the man who moves for himself, who rises, refines, and refuses to abandon his standards, becomes the blueprint for what she didn't even know she was looking for. She won't think about you because you said the right things. She'll think about you because you lived the right things, because you were the rare kind of man who didn't just talk about integrity, presence, and purpose. You embodied them in every interaction, every breath, every glance. And that embodiment leaves a scar, not the kind that hurts, but the kind that marks her deeply, beautifully, permanently. You didn't just enter her world, you changed the temperature of it. You didn't just speak, you resonated. So ask yourself, are you still waiting for permission to be that man? Or are you ready to step into him now? Because when you do, she won't just remember you. She'll feel you again and again in the quiet moments. And you'll know, without needing to ask, that you became unforgettable, not by chasing her, but by finding yourself. The man who finds himself doesn't just change his own life, he changes the lives of everyone who crosses his path. Because when you truly know who you are, you stop needing approval. You stop bending. You stop shrinking. There's no need to compete, no need to convince. You walk differently. You speak less, but say more. Your silence carries weight because it's no longer empty. It's full of self-respect, discipline, and truth. That is the kind of silence that keeps her awake at night. Not confused, not uncertain, captivated. She can't shake it because it felt like gravity, not pressure, not performance. Just a quiet pull that made her feel both safe and challenged. And it's not about playing games. It's about energy. It's about becoming the kind of man who is so grounded in who he is that he makes others pause and reflect. You become the still point in a chaotic world, a reminder that stability, clarity, and purpose still exist. That presence isn't about being loud, it's about being anchored. She doesn't think about you all night because you entertained her. She thinks about you because you represented something rare, something she didn't even know she was searching for until she felt it. That kind of presence can't be faked. It comes from choosing hard things daily, from facing yourself without flinching, from standing alone until the right things align. It's built in the small moments, the morning you didn't hit snooze, the boundary you didn't break, the truth you didn't swallow. Every single decision you make when no one's watching builds the man she won't forget. It's not about impressing her. It's about honoring you. Because when you honor yourself consistently, your energy speaks long before your words ever do. She feels it, even when you're gone. Especially when you're gone. And here's what makes you powerful. Most men will never get this. They'll keep chasing validation. They'll keep seeking identity through women, through attention, through achievement. But the ones who truly captivate, they're not seeking. They've become whole without applause, solid without spotlight, fulfilled without performance. And that wholeness radiates. It doesn't beg, it doesn't need, it attracts. So if you're still asking what to say, how to act, what to do to make her think about you, you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't, how do I make her think about me? The question is, how do I become a man whose presence is unforgettable? Not by accident, not by manipulation, but by design, by discipline, by depth. Because when you go deep within yourself, when you face your fears, master your habits, speak your truth, and own your space, you awaken a force that speaks louder than any tactic ever could. That's the version of you she remembers, not the version that tried, the version that embodied. It's in the way you respond instead of react, the way you observe instead of judge, the way you lead instead of chase. That energy changes everything. It commands respect without needing to ask for it. And when you give that energy to a woman, not as a transaction, not to get something, but as an overflow of who you are, she feels it on a level no one else can reach. Because you're not asking for her to complete you. You're offering her a space so solid that she feels safe to expand. That's unforgettable. That's what makes her lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying your words, your calm, your confidence. That's what makes her compare every man after you to the standard you silently set. But you don't set that standard for her. You set it for you. Because you finally realize that the only approval you ever needed was your own. The second you own that truth, fully, relentlessly, unapologetically, you stop asking to be remembered. You become a memory, a lesson, a presence. The one who didn't just walk in and try to take, but the one who left something behind without even trying. And when she thinks of you, it won't be for what you did. It'll be for who you were, unmoved, unshaken, undeniable, the man who didn't follow the noise, the man who became the signal. You don't have to speak loudly to be remembered. You don't have to chase to be valued. Real presence isn't about taking up space, it's about owning it. And when you become that man, everything around you begins to shift. People move differently in your energy, not because you demand it, but because they feel something from you that can't be explained, only experienced. She feels it when your eyes meet hers and you don't flinch, you don't rush to impress, you don't scramble for attention. You're just there, centered, composed, clear. It's in that calm that she senses depth. Because in a world where everyone is trying to be seen, the man who sees himself stands out without trying. The man who has met his shadows and refused to be ruled by them. The man who walks like he's not proving anything, because he's already proven it to himself in silence. That's the kind of energy that lingers. That's the reason she can't get you off her mind. Not because you flooded her with words or gestures, but because you left space for her to feel you. In a culture obsessed with instant gratification, you offered something rare, intention. You moved slowly. You chose deliberately, and in doing so, You made her question the pace of her own life. You didn't distract her from herself. You made her return to herself. That's the mark of a powerful man. One who doesn't entertain for approval, but who awakens something real. One who doesn't chase love, but creates an energy so grounded it invites others to rise. A woman remembers a man like that, not for what he said, but for how he made her feel, not manipulated, not impressed, but safe. Safe to be soft. Safe to be seen. Safe to be herself without shrinking or performing. But that kind of energy can't be accessed from the surface. It requires inner mastery. It requires you to look at every part of yourself, your wounds, your habits, your patterns, and own them without shame. It means no longer outsourcing your worth to validation, no longer waiting for permission to stand tall. Because no one is coming to crown you. You have to become the man who earns his crown through quiet self-respect, through silent repetition, through decisions no one will ever see. That's where strength is forged. Not in performance, but in presence. Not in control, but in consistency. And the deeper you go into that work, the less you need from the world. You don't need her to complete you. You don't need anyone to fill the gaps, because you've already filled them with discipline, with purpose, with truth. She thinks about you because she felt seen in your presence, not analyzed, not studied, or just seen, without judgment, without agenda. You didn't try to change her. You didn't try to convince her. You simply stood as a mirror, reflecting back the parts of her that longed to be acknowledged. That's not charm, that's not manipulation, that's masculine depth. And it's rarer than most realize, because most people are too busy reacting, too busy trying to be liked. But when you stop playing the game, when you rise above the noise, you become the kind of man who leads, not by force, but by example. And leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to be authentic in a world that rewards masks. When you carry that courage, people notice, women notice, she notices, not because you tried to be different, but because you chose to be real. And that realness, it's unforgettable. It doesn't fade when you walk away. It lingers in the air, like the echo of a truth too rare to ignore. She carries it with her, not out of need, but out of recognition. Because a woman doesn't truly miss the man who played it safe. She misses the man who awakened a version of herself she didn't know existed. And you didn't awaken it with charm. You did it by being unapologetically whole, by refusing to settle, by showing her, not through force, but through consistency, what self-mastery feels like. That is what makes you rise above the rest. That is what makes her think about you when the world quiets down. So the question is never, how do I make her remember me? The question is, have I become a man worth remembering? Because when you build yourself with that kind of focus, that kind of power, you stop needing to ask if she'll think about you. You'll know. She already is. Most men are chasing moments. Few are building legacies. That's why they fade. That's why they're forgotten. Because attention is cheap, but presence is earned. A man who's just after her time will lose her interest. But the one who moves with purpose, who stands for something deeper, becomes impossible to ignore. He isn't just another interaction. He's an impact. There's a quiet strength in the man who doesn't flinch under pressure, who doesn't get lost in temporary validation, who doesn't need to prove he's enough, because he's already done the internal work to know it. That kind of man doesn't just walk into a room. He redefines the atmosphere, without trying, without flexing. He simply is, and people feel it. She feels it. Not in the noise, but in the depth. Not in the flash, but in the foundation. And here's the truth most will never accept. You will never be deeply remembered for the image you craft. You will be remembered for the energy you embody. Authenticity is magnetic. Confidence that doesn't come from ego but from alignment is unforgettable. The man who knows who he is, truly knows, is the man she replays in her mind long after the conversation ends. Because he wasn't trying to be liked. He was being true. And truth lingers. It challenges. It awakens. Every time you compromise who you are for attention, you weaken your presence. You dilute your power. You become noise. But when you stand firm, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you temporary connection, you build a signal so strong that people tune into it without knowing why. That's when she thinks of you. Not because you demanded it, but because your integrity echoed louder than any words could. This is what separates boys from men. One is seeking, the other is rooted. One reacts, the other responds. One adjusts himself to fit in. The other stands still until the world around him adjusts. The man who becomes a standard never has to beg for attention. He becomes the reference point, and she doesn't forget him, because nothing else feels quite the same after him. Your power lies not in pursuit, but in posture. The the way you hold yourself when things don't go your way, the way you speak when there's no reward attached, the way you treat others when you have nothing to gain. These are the invisible traits that build visible attraction. This is the substance that builds a legacy, not just a moment. She doesn't want perfection. She wants realness, but not the kind that spills insecurity and calls it honesty. The kind that carries scars and doesn't hide them. That says, I've been through the fire, and I'm still here. Stronger, wiser, sharper. That energy is rare. It's felt in your tone, in your silence, in your discipline. It's felt in the way you don't rush, in the way you make space for presence, not performance. That's what makes her wonder about you at night. Not because you played a role well, but because you refused to play one at all. You showed up as yourself, fully and fearlessly, and in doing so, you gave her something most people don't, clarity. Clarity that you're not here to be liked, you're here to live truth. That message is so powerful, it doesn't need volume, just consistency. When you lead with character, not craving, you no longer chase, you attract. You become the exception, the one she compares others to, not because you were perfect, but because you were honest. And that honesty breeds trust, that trust breeds desire. And the desire, it lives beyond the physical. It's spiritual, it's emotional, it's psychological. That's the level that keeps her thinking about you when the world is asleep. Every man wants to be remembered. Few are willing to become memorable. That takes work, inner work, relentless self-respect, ruthless commitment to growth. It takes choosing who you are over who they want you to be. It takes walking alone until you can walk with someone without losing your direction. She doesn't miss the man who gave her attention. She misses the man who made her feel safe in his presence and challenged by his discipline. The one who lived by standards, not by scripts. The one who carried himself like he didn't need her, but valued her. That's the man she replays in her thoughts. That's the man she dreams of becoming better for, not because he asked her to, but because his very existence inspired her to rise. So don't ask how to impress her. Ask how to become so rooted in who you are that she can't help but feel the difference. That's how you stop being an option and start being a standard. That's how you leave a mark that doesn't fade. That's how you become unforgettable. Power doesn't speak, it resonates. It doesn't need approval, applause, or validation. It simply exists, and its presence changes everything around it. When a man moves from that place, everything he touches carries weight. His words aren't just heard, they're felt. His silence isn't empty, it's charged. Because he's not trying to be noticed. He's grounded in who he is. And when a woman feels that level of certainty, it shakes something inside her. Not because she's impressed, but because something in her remembers what it feels like to be around a man who doesn't flinch. She may not understand it in the moment. She may not even know why she keeps thinking about you. But it's not about logic. It's energetic. It's spiritual. You left a mark on her nervous system, not her ego. You made her feel something that couldn't be faked, stability. Not the kind that's spoken about in grand declarations, but the kind that lives in your rhythm, your calm, your gaze. The kind of stability that says, you can bring your storm, I won't be moved. That's the energy that makes you unforgettable. Because you didn't try to be her fantasy. You became her anchor. And in a world full of chaos, distraction, and inconsistency, the anchor always stands out. She remembers the man who didn't need to chase because he had already chosen himself. The man who had nothing to prove because he was already living his truth. The man who didn't need to show off because his existence showed up. This isn't about playing games. It's about becoming so whole that your presence heals. Becoming so aligned that your presence triggers reflection. A woman will think about you all night, not because you said the right things, but because you made her feel things she didn't know she was allowed to feel. Safe to be soft, safe to be quiet. Safe to let her guard down. And that level of emotional safety doesn't come from charm. It comes from work, the kind of work most men avoid. The work that doesn't show on the outside right away. The kind that's done in solitude, in silence, in discipline. Facing your own fears, confronting your patterns, holding yourself to standards when no one is watching. That's the foundation of true masculine power. And when that power is real, it doesn't need a performance. It just is. She feels that, deep down. Whether she admits it or not. Whether she's aware of it or not. A woman always feels when a man has done the inner work. She feels it in the way he doesn't react to her moods, in the way he holds space without trying to fix her, in the way he stays centered even when tested. That kind of man is rare. And what's rare stays on the mind. But here's the part most never understand. You don't become that man by thinking about women. You become that man by building yourself, brick by brick, day by day, through failure, through doubt, through the temptation to settle. You become him by choosing to rise when no one claps, by choosing solitude over approval, by choosing purpose over popularity. And once you embody that level of self-respect, you no longer wonder if you're good enough. You know it. Not in an arrogant way, but in a quiet, unshakable way. The way mountains don't compete with noise. They outlast it. That's what she feels. That's why she thinks of you when the lights go out and the world gets quiet. Because your energy stays. Not as a memory, but as a feeling she can't shake. The question isn't, how do I get her to think of me? The question is, have I become the kind of man who moves her without trying? Because when you reach that level, it's not about tactics. It's about truth. And truth is magnetic. Truth is undeniable. Truth stays long after words have faded. That's what builds real attraction. Not flash, not lines, not games, but depth. The depth that only comes from living with intention. From being a man of value long before anyone recognizes it. From showing up for yourself so consistently that showing up for others becomes second nature. That kind of man doesn't chase energy. He shifts it. He walks into a room and alters the frequency without a word. He doesn't need to entertain. He embodies what others are still searching for. And she feels it, not because you performed, but because you aligned. This is how you leave a legacy. This is how you stop being an option and become a standard. Not by focusing on her reaction, but by refining your essence. Because once you're rooted in who you are, everything you want begins to gravitate toward you, effortlessly. That's the mark of a man she thinks about long after you've left the room. That's what creates an impact that lingers in her heart, in her body, in her soul. Not because you asked her to remember you, but because you became unforgettable. A man who commands presence isn't loud, he's certain. Certainty isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about knowing yourself so deeply that you don't need to be anyone else. And in a world where most people are wearing masks, that level of authenticity is not just refreshing, it's irresistible. Because it's rare, because it's real. And what's real speaks to the part of her that's tired of pretending too. She's not thinking about the man who tried the hardest. She's thinking about the man who didn't try at all, because everything he did came from alignment, not effort. You don't impress her by bending to her expectations. You impress her by standing in your truth when it's inconvenient, by not changing your core just to be liked, by not shrinking to fit her comfort zone. That's the kind of strength that stays on her mind. She's surrounded by attention. DMs, compliments, invitations. It's all noise. What she's not surrounded by is substance. The kind of energy that doesn't beg for approval but commands respect. The kind that doesn't chase the moment but builds the future.